I think you're going to want to stick around for the next several minutes on Weekend Connection today. I have as my guest a very special friend, and she's an author. In fact, she recently penned a book about growing old. Yeah, I told you, I think you're going to want to stick around for today's guest. Her name is Frances Fuller. She's up next on Weekend Connection. Hello there, my friend. Welcome to Weekend Connection on the Bible Broadcasting Network. And I have wanted to talk with this lady for a long time, and her name is Frances Fuller, and she has written a book, and it's called Helping Yourself Grow Old, Things I Said to Myself When I Was Almost 90. Frances, welcome to Weekend Connection.
Thank you, Ed.
It is good to have you on finally. It's taken a while. But well worth the wait. And I know our BBN listeners are going to be blessed by hearing what you have to say about growing old and about this book specifically. And we'll jump into that in just a little bit. But first, a little bit about who you are and your background, if you would.
I was born in Wynne, Arkansas, which was a small town 50 miles to the west from Memphis, Tennessee, just to tell you where that was. My parents were both from Louisiana, but my dad was working for the Missouri Pacific Railroad, and Wynne was a railroad center. I was 3 years old, and I was playing in the front yard of my house, and a girl who was about 16 years old stopped, and she knocked on the door. And she said to my mother, every Sunday morning I walk by here on the way to Sunday school down at the Baptist church. And every Sunday morning, this little child is playing here in the yard. And I thought I could just as well take her with me. And you know, this is 1932 in a small town America. Everybody trusted everybody. And mother said, okay, I'll have her ready next Sunday. And that's how I went to church. I mean, I was so loved in that church. And I can still remember just being hugged every morning as I arrived at Sunday school. And in my book, I tell this story. And I say, that's who I am. And you need to know at the beginning, that's who I am still. I'm this little girl who went to a church with a stranger who stopped and invited me. And there I found that it was God's house and I was loved. And so I learned that God loved me. And I am still that child who wants God's love and needs God's love and shares God's love as I can.
And your growing up years, growing in your faith, and when did you decide to become a writer and to get into journalism?
When I graduated from high school in 1947, there was not much a girl could aspire to do. And some of the girls in my class were going to be nurses. And I thought that sounded like something really nice until I met chemistry, and I just was not any good at chemistry. I actually thought I was smart until I got to chemistry, and then I didn't ever know what was going on. But anyway, I was graduating, and I had not a clue what I was going to do next. I didn't have a plan. That final week of school, someone came from the local newspaper and talked to my English teacher and wanted to know if there was anyone in the graduating class who was already good at English and might come to the newspaper and learn how to write for the newspaper and become their reporter. My teacher recommended me. And so, in fact, I went from graduation to the newspaper office immediately. I had a job. I loved what they gave me to do. And they taught me how to write everything from a news story to a wedding. They taught me how to write an editorial. They taught me all the different things that I needed to know to write good news stories and the kinds of articles that newspapers use. And the result of that was that I was inspired to go off to college and study journalism. And so they lost me in a way, but I came back every summer. Every summer they gave me a job, and everybody on the newspaper got a 2-week vacation while I did their job. So I worked all summer, and it was wonderful to have the experience and do my studying at the same time.
I'll bet. Where did you go to college?
I went to Louisiana Tech.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Louisiana Tech because my grandmother lived just a few blocks from the campus, and she invited me to come and live with her.
And that writing experience that you gained at the newspaper, thanks to that teacher, thanks to that mentor and the mentors you had at the newspaper, really came in handy as you and your husband and your kids served overseas.
Yes, very much so. When we arrived in Beirut, there was a small publishing ministry. It was not really a publishing house, but people had started, 2 women basically, had started creating little Sunday school materials. They were writing little lessons that they were sharing with the churches so that they could teach the children on Sunday mornings. From that, the publishing house actually developed. I was appointed to a committee that was to assist Virginia Cobb, who was running the publishing ministry. And though we were appointed to Jordan, we spent only 1 year in Lebanon. I went on to Jordan, and I did a lot of work for the publishing house from Jordan. I wrote things that they needed and asked me to write.
And you and your family spent, what was it, 30 or more years serving in the Middle East?
Yes. In Jordan, my husband was responsible for a boys' school in the village, and he also helped to establish the first co-educational school in Jordan, in the capital city. And we moved into the capital city. I was sitting in my house writing while Wayne was out trying to establish this school, and actually we've left out the fact that we both went to seminary in Berkeley, California. We went to Golden Gate, and there in Golden Gate we were exposed to the people of the world. And so when we applied to the mission board and they asked, where did we want to go? At first we didn't know. And then we said, well, who do we really like? And it was the Arabs. And that was a bit surprising to a lot of people, but they were the people with whom we just connected in Berkeley. That helped Wayne, especially when he was establishing the school, because it turned out that an Arab friend that we had made, he was a student at Cal, and Wayne had met him, and they had become friends. And Wayne discovered that this man was in the city planning department. The man helped Wayne very much by showing him a map of the city to show him where he should build his school. I mean, that's just one example of how the friends from the Arab world whom we made in Berkeley we reconnected with them in the Middle East.
At the start of this interview, I mentioned the name of your book that you have written recently. It's called Helping Yourself Grow Old: Things I Said to Myself When I Was Almost 90. Frances, when did you begin writing this book, and why did you write the book?
It all began after my husband died, very soon after Wayne died. We had lived together for 63 years, and it was not as though we had not had separate lives. I mean, running the publishing house, I did a lot of traveling by myself, and Wayne often was alone and did traveling himself. We had our separate lives and our separate duties, but there were always 2 of us. And then suddenly, when I was alone, I was aware that I was old. I think that when there are two people, they compensate for one another. What one can't do, the other can do.
Yes.
And so you don't notice how as much that you're losing some of your capabilities. So a friend brought me a book. He brought me Atul Gawande's book, which is called On Being Mortal. And the books told a lot of the inevitabilities about getting old and what we can expect and what we even can't do anything about because it's just going to happen. And I began then to look for other books because I tend to look for books for answers to questions. I found lots of books, but they were all written by academics. You know, they were written by gerontologists and doctors and sociologists, all people who had never been old. And so what I realized what I really wanted was a memoir. I was really looking for a memoir. I wanted somebody who would tell me what their experience of getting old was. I stumbled across, looking for memoirs, I stumbled across the book, Mary Karr's book on how to write memoir, because Mary Karr wrote the college textbook on writing memoir. I discovered that Mary Karr says you should not write about anything until it's about 7 years behind you. It takes that long, she said, to have good perspective. So I thought, well, for goodness sakes, no wonder there's no memoirs by people who are 87 years old. You can't very well reasonably think, well, this is an interesting experience. In 7 years, I'll write about it. That doesn't make any sense. And so I just sat down and I started writing. I began to realize that I had some things to learn and some decisions to make. And so I started to turn these into promises to myself about what I would do. One of the first things I thought was that I wanted to live with purpose. I didn't want to just sort of sit there and wonder, when does this all end? But I wanted to have a reason for getting out of bed in the morning and knowing what God wanted me to do and what I could do for someone else or what I could do to make things better for myself. And so I wrote, I will live with purpose. And so it was like a promise to myself. And I wrote, I will live with gratitude. And then I wrote, I will be who I am. And that's when I wrote the story about how important Sunday school was to me. I wrote a section that's just called Grieving. Not every one of my chapters was a promise. Some of them were just a topic that I felt I had to live with. Grieving was one of them. I wrote about my house, and I promised myself to mop the kitchen floor. And this is one reader wrote to me and said, I can agree with everything you said except mopping the kitchen floor. But I have a thing about my kitchen floor. I want it to be clean. So those are the kinds of things that I wrote. And I started to realize that this was helping me. It was really helping me a lot. It was giving me something constructive to do every day. And at the same time, it was helping me to learn how to cope with life alone in this huge house. I'm left in it alone. These things that I wrote, somehow because of in the writing gave me some objectivity, but they were very personal, and they helped me to think about how I was living and why I was living this way and what I wanted to do about the future. And I made some really important decisions. And you see in the writing of this, you naturally you build on the past. And I remembered my own mother as she was aging and how she changed, and how, in some ways, I admired and wanted to do what she did, and how, in other ways, I did not want to be like her.
Mm.
For instance, my mother had a really hard time losing control of things. And so there wasn't much that she could be in control of. And so she tended to be controlling of her own daughters who were like in their 60s, you know.
Mm.
And so there were little jobs that she needed to give up and give them to someone else. In the end, the biggest issue was she didn't have anybody signing on her bank account. And we insisted that there should be another signer on the bank account of a woman who was getting close to 90 years old and was physically unwell. And that was very difficult for my mother just to let somebody be a signer on her bank account,
Mm-hmm.
because she felt that she was losing control. So I wrote, one of my chapters is that I will relinquish control. And that's when I named one of my sons as my power of attorney and gave him authority to make some decisions for me.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a very important step for me. It gave me a sudden sense of security, really. And at the same time, I had given up my own power to make some decisions by myself.
Allow me to mention some of these other essays that you've written. One is called I Will Text. I Will Throw Away My Own Trash.
Yes.
That's kind of similar to mopping the floor, right?
Right.
I Will Play. I Will Welcome the Silence. And Learning from Friends, just to name a few. And these are all personal essays from your book. And there are other essays as well. I will keep growing. I will be responsible for my health. I will tell stories. I will have a bad day. I will choose again. I will bless my grandchildren. Boy, oh boy, is that important to hand down that spiritual heritage. And one more I'm looking at here. I will trust God with the end. Frances, how can our BBN listeners get a hold of your book? And if they'd like to communicate with you, how can they reach you?
People can get on my website, which is there are two names, but they both take you to the same place. The easiest one is Frances Fuller Author. It's www.com.
Okay,
Frances Fuller Author.
And for our listeners, Frances is spelled Frances.
Yes.
Okay, FrancesFullerAuthor.com.
I write a blog, which right now is dealing with how you make decisions related to retirement homes. If anyone is thinking about going to a retirement home, though I write about different aspects of aging from time to time and tell stories about people I have met where I am, other people who are elderly. My blog, if anyone wanted my blog, they could ask me for it. First of all, you can find the blog on the website, and then you can make a comment and ask for it that way. Or you can send me a request for it to my email address, which is Frances, Frances, 0516 at att.net. If you ask me to put you on my mailing list, I will be happy to do that and send you my blog. I only write about one a month, so I don't really fill up your email box.
That's great. And we will have this contact information on hand for our listeners. And it's just been a joy to talk with you today, Francis. Thank you so much for taking time with me and our Bible Broadcasting Network listeners. And just this book is just fascinating. And I really think you have filled a niche or a niche. And again, the title is Helping Yourself Grow Old, Things I Said to Myself when I was almost 90. Francis Fuller, thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you,
me on
Ed.
Weekend Connection. Thanks so much.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Again, that contact info for you, francisfullerauthor.com, FRANCES, francisfullerauthor.com, and by email, francisfuller0516 at att.net. Weekend Connection is a public affairs program of the Bible Broadcasting Network.
Thank you for listening to this feature, a production of BBN, the Bible Broadcasting Network. BBN provides 24-hour Christian programming, great Christian music, and Bible teaching. Listen to BBN by clicking the link in the description.